Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the third race of the first stage of the 2019 Manufacturer Series season, which was a Group 3 race held at the Circuit de la Sarthe. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've qualified 9th out of 20 drivers, all as being B driver rating. My story for qualifying: 9, what the lap time was for pole position of 4:04.1 as you're seeing right now. I was extremely disappointed in myself because my best practice qualifying time was a 4:03.9 and I felt I could have improved upon that as part of the qualifying session, but what actually happened was I ran wide in turn 6, which cost me time naturally, and on top of that anyone who ran wide at turn 6 ended up picking up a penalty. And that penalty was to be taken in the second part of the Mulsanne straight, meaning I lost a lot of time there, and that's what led to my lap being a 4:06.9. Now this meant in terms of the race strategy, I realised that I'd have to drive the wheels off the car in order to get a good result, because this was a bogey track for the NSX, in that whilst the car was very powerful through the technical section, so it turns 10 all the way through to the end of each lap, the Mulsanne straight, which was split into 3 parts thanks to the 2 chicanes at turns 7 and 8, would be an area where I'd struggle for top line speed compared to the Ford GT behind me and the Aston Martin behind them and the Aston Martin in front of me, and I need to use the slipstream of other drivers to get the most out of the straight and mitigate my weakness. And on top of that you also had the Golf or the Toyota straight, can't remember exactly what it's called, between turns 9 and 10, another extended straight where this weakness would appear again, and I'd be really having to try and mitigate that through just driving the car as hard as possible in the sections where it performed best. In terms of tyre management and fuel consumption, no concerns there. This was a sprint race. The 4 laps would be manageable on a single fuel load and a single set of racing hard tyres, which everybody had to take. The only concern I had about tyre wear was on the final lap where the rear tyres would be starting to fall off, and I'd have to manage them a little bit through the Porsche curves, so turns 13 through to 17, a high speed section, a wonderful flying section, and if I could just manage them appropriately there wouldn't be too much of an issue. We're about to get underway then with a rolling start. And funny thing is, you're probably already thinking, for those of you who know the track layout quite well, you're going to be starting in the middle of a chicane, aren't you? That's correct, because we've got the 4 chicanes coming up, the 2 of them, so turns 18 through to 21 to end the lap, and we're going to be starting the race dead on turn 18. And that means I can't get on the power immediately, and the Aston Martin in front of me is going to start on turn 19 and have a very similar difficulty here, in that we both get on the power a little bit too soon, we both end up going a little bit sideways. Unfortunately, because I'm trying to get into the slipstream of the Aston Martin in front as soon as possible, I get on the throttle too early coming out of the first chicane, compromising my entry point into the second chicane, which compromises my exit out of turn 21 and means that I start to fall off at the back of the Aston Martin as we go across the start-finish straight to begin lap number 1. Now going into turn 1 here, I decided to take it lightly, taking a defensive line going into the Dunlop chicane, so turn 2 here, the left-hander followed by a quick right-hander. The idea being that my tyres are cold right now and I don't want to push them too hard, I just want to get them up to pace, get the car settled in, locked in and ready for racing. So what you'll see is I'm trying to hang on to the back of the Aston Martin in front, but because the car's not quite up to scratch yet, the tyres will be warm by the midpoint of this lap. I'm not pushing the car too hard, and that's costing me the ability to stay really close to the Aston Martin. And here, what happened in qualifying, I decided to play it safe through turn 6, whereas the Aston Martin takes a more natural lift-off line by the looks of things going through turn 6. Normally I'd lift off the throttle and just going through in 4th gear. Instead I broke heavily, went down to 3rd, and then got the power on going through turn 6. It means that I've fallen well off the backside of the Aston Martin in front, and you can see their top end speed is really giving them an advantage at this point. And I even started saying under my breath as we were racing, Jesus Christ, look at that Aston Martin go. And looking at the timings on the left hand side of your screen, you can see the guys behind have also got the better top line speed, with the Ford GT and Aston Martin behind, and they're both slipstreaming off of one another, giving themselves the ability to gain time on me. Albeit because they're fighting, going through the first chicane, this means I can really pull distance from them as we go down the second part of the Mulsanne straight now. And so I don't have to actually worry about the potential of aggression from behind or having to defend against the guys behind in 10th and 11th. Instead, I can just focus on trying to chase down 8th and the higher positions. And that's something that I was also thinking about. Once I start getting close to someone down the straight, do I want to really fight them, or do I want to bump draft them, or try to help them out in getting close to the guys ahead of both of us rather than just fighting for one position? And that's a conundrum we'll come back to later on. For now, we're coming through the second chicane, and what you're going to see is the Aston Martin actually cuts the track limit there, and that gives them a half-second penalty. And at the time I thought, right, that's great, half-second penalty, I might be able to pick up the place off them when we go into the next penalty zone, which was after turn 12, so quite a way away. But in retrospect, what I realised after the race was a half-second penalty in a car where you've got the straight line speed advantage isn't going to really make a difference if you've got the ability just to pull so much distance from the guy behind. And what we'll see here is, because I'm quite careful going through turn 9 and the Aston Martin gets on the power quite nicely coming out of turn 9 compared to myself, they're now going to disappear from my sight as we go down the Golf of the Toyota straight, heading down towards turn 10, and that half-second penalty means Jack diddly squats them right now because I'm nowhere near enough in order to be able to punish them for it. And the guy behind in the Ford GT is starting to gain because they got a much smoother run through turn 9. Fortunately for me, I've got enough of a distance that whilst they're picking up the toe off of my car right now, or the slipstream, as we come down to turn 10, I take it really aggressively here, lifting off the throttle going into turn 10, and then slamming hard down the brakes going down into turn 11. The Ford GT goes very deep into the corner, costing them the ability to stay on my backside, and now once again I'm able to pursue the guys in front without having to worry about defending anymore, or at least for the time being. And we see the Aston Martin is about to take their penalty as I get a tiny bit sideways coming out of turn 12, doesn't cost me too much time, but because I lost so much time going through turn 9 down onto the Gulf straight, as a result of that the Aston Martin has taken their penalty, and whilst I'm in their distance slipstream now, which starts at 0.8 seconds, that's a correction from my previous videos, it's not a second, it's 0.8 seconds, I just can't capitalise on this, and now I have to sit behind them as we go through the Porsche curves and watch how close I can get to the back of that Aston Martin, who really hasn't settled down into the Porsche curves as cleanly as I have. And this is immediately triggered in my mind that I'm losing a huge amount of time, not to the Aston Martin in front, but to the guys in 7th all the way up to 1st. And now I can't take my natural line through these curves. Instead, I've got to sit behind this guy and back out of the throttle as we come through turn 17 to complete the curve section, now heading down to the Ford chicane. And what I'm expecting at this point is the Aston Martin's going to go quite deep into the Ford chicane, so give them a little bit of peak but start to close in behind them. But actually what ends up happening is, because their brakes are much stronger than my own, in the end I end up bumping into the back of them. Completely my fault, I need to appreciate that, and I should have pulled over to the left hand side and let the car go sideways. I do flash my lights here to apologise, it was entirely my fault that, and that's something I have to get used to in the fact that the Aston Martin's got the better brakes compared to my own car. What this was also telling, perhaps not at the time of me racing, was that a good number of the fellow drivers in this race were not as confident in their driving abilities on this circuit compared to myself, and that's something which I didn't appreciate when racing, and we'll talk about that at the end. For now, we're stuck behind the Aston Martin on lap number 2, going into the S's at this point, so turns 4 and 5 coming up with the left-hander flying through into the right-hander, setting up turn 6, and what you can see is I'm trying to stay close to the Aston Martin in front. But again, because my confidence has been knocked a little bit going up into turn 6 here based on qualifying, I decided to break down to 3rd gear once again and not make a mistake. Albeit I get a bit of a cleaner run through turn 6 this time, but again, because the Aston Martin synced it up very nicely and carried a lot of speed, unfortunately I'm not able to gain, and instead they're starting to pull away down the first part of the Mulsanne straight, much like on lap number 1. On the plus side, however, the guys behind in 10th, they've pretty much disappeared from my sight right now. Don't have to worry about them. They are gradually gaining on me, but they're nowhere near enough to punish me going down the straight anymore or pick up a distant toe. So it's purely a case of trying to get as close as possible to the Aston Martin and try to get myself back in the swing of getting a good exit off of turn 6 if I'm going to abuse this straight. We go through the first chicane, so turn 7 here. And what I was also thinking about at this point as well is, looking at 6th and 7th in front, they're getting actually closer and closer to us in 8th and 9th. And I thought, right, that Aston Martin might be starting to benefit from a distant toe for them, as I did get the better exit out of 7, and we can see that the gap between myself and the Aston Martin is almost within slipstream range, but not quite. So we're going to have to get a good exit out of turn 8. But I was concerned about the fact they may actually be benefiting from the slipstream of the guys in front of them now, making my life so much harder. But again, we'll work on that. As we come through turn 8 here, you're going to see the Aston Martin do the same thing as they did on lap 1, cutting the track limits at this point. Not sure why the track limits weren't seen as the curb, to be honest, but still they pick up a half-second penalty, and now I've really got to get a good run out of turn 9. I can't afford what happened on the first lap to happen again, where I got a bit hesitant going into turn 9, I got on the power poorly, and that means that the Aston Martin can really open the gap up going down the Gulf Straight towards turn 10. So you're going to see this time I work really hard on getting it right, and I get this perfectly, I think. Getting on the brake nicely, coming down to second gear, getting it right on tight on the apex, and then coming out and get on the power gradually, and that lines me up nicely for coming into the Gulf Straight. But the problem is, 7th and 6th have fallen so far off the pace because they're fighting one another and perhaps not as good around turn 9 on this instance, i.e. this lap, but the Aston Martin is now definitely picking up the slipstream of the Lamborghini in 7th place, and this was frustrating because look how much the gap has opened up, 1.3 seconds, 1.4 seconds, and now I'm having to think to myself, right, I've really got to overdrive the car going through turn 10 here. So you see I go full aggression into the corner, I lift quite late compared to the 100 board, getting nicely down the brakes here, down to second gear, hooking up nicely to the inside of the corner at turn 11, letting the car flow out on its momentum or its roll going in towards turn 12 here, and the guys in front are picking up penalties left, right and centre. The Mercedes in 7th, the Aston Martin 8th has got the half-second penalty, and what I thought at this point was, right, I'm guaranteed to take the Mercedes, that 3-second penalty will be applied not here but later on. The Aston Martin takes their penalty, losing a bit of speed, and it's just enough for me to be able to get past them at this point. So now I'm going to be up into 8th place as we go through the Porsche curves, and that means I can leave this Aston Martin behind and settle them in the dust. Thank goodness for that. Let's go hunt in 7th and 6th. So we come down here braking just after the final road marker to show that you need to get back in your lane. And as we come into turn 14 here, you can see already that Aston Martin is falling off of my backside. They're not as comfortable going through this section, whereas I can really enjoy the NSX's cornering capabilities here as we go through turn 16 and come through into 17. And what you'll note is the Mercedes is about to take its penalty, and I thought, right, that's 7th out of the way. Somebody's also about to pull out the race. Yep, they've just pulled out of the race. 3rd place pulled out the race for some reason, not sure what happened. So now we're up into 7th. Let's get 6th off of the Mercedes and hunt down that Lamborghini in 5th. As we come through here into the first of the 2 forward chicanes, getting nicely on the brakes, flying the car through, and you can see that I'm already gaining time on the Lamborghini in front, and this is starting to affirm something in the back of my mind. The guys in this race are not as confident as I am in their knowledge of this track, or at least their race pace, and I can really get past this Lamborghini fast. So to do so here, as we come on to lap number 3, you see I'm right behind them right now. I'm not expecting to make a move through turns 1 through to 3, so Dunlop curve into Dunlop chicane, because what I thought is, right, just pressure this Lamborghini, perhaps they'll make a mistake. And they do go a little bit deep into the chicane here. Unfortunately, I can't capitalise because they don't go deep enough. So instead we're coming towards the S's now, and we can see that whilst they get a good run off of turn 3, I'm getting a very similar run to them, and we've already left the guys behind us behind, so 7th and 8th, so forget about them. We're now coming through turns 4 and 5. I back off a tiny bit here because I don't want to run too close to the Lamborghini coming up into turn 6 in case they brake like myself, and I decide, right, punch this corner a little bit harder. I go a bit sideways and missing the apex, but I'm not punished too hard because the Lamborghini gets a little bit sideways as we switch to the replay view, and now I'm chasing them down the straight and I'm in the slipstream zone. And you can see how long it takes me to get enough speed to be able to outrun the Lamborghini down the straight here, and what I think to myself is, right, I want to get in front of them before the end to the first part of the Mulsanne straight rather than having to lift. So I make the move here and I just about make it and get back in front of them before we come into the first chicane. I put it right on the limit, I get it just right as I get back in front, and we stamp down the brakes here, going down into turn 7. And they get a little bit sideways, perhaps their brakes aren't as potent as our own, and now we go down to the second part of the Mulsanne straight, and I'm expecting them to overtake me on the right here. I'm just going to take a line and expect them to make the move. Instead they go around to the left hand side, as you're about to see, which shocked me a little bit because I thought, right, you're actually driving on the dirt there, you're going to get your left hand tyres quite dirty, but nonetheless I pull over to the right completely to take the natural line going into the second chicane, so turn 8. The Lamborghini is just about to get in front of me, so I tuck in behind their slipstream once again, and I'm going to be charging after them into this chicane, not trying to make a move here, just simply follow them in, getting on the braking zone nicely, and as we go through the chicane you see we hook it up very well, and we're right in the slipstream of the Lamborghini going down the final part of the Mulsanne straight as we head up towards turn 9. And I thought, right, I need to potentially make a move going into turn 9 here, but as you can see, whilst I'm in the slipstream, I actually get second thoughts about this, because what I think is, right, I'm going to be stamping on the brakes really hard, and I'm actually going to peak a little bit to see where I'm in relation to where turn 9 begins. There's my little peak, and I decide, right, don't go for it, it's too dangerous here, it could cost you both your positions. So instead, lift it a little bit, and then come into turn 9, brakes are glowing red, and as we come through turn 9 here, hooked in the slipstream once again, and now we're heading down the Gulf Straight to turns 10 through to 11 and 12, where I thought, right, I can potentially get the Lamborghini going into 11, because I feel that much more confident on my braking position. But unfortunately, remember what I said earlier about the confidence of other drivers on this circuit? Well, that's going to come back to haunt me here. Now you may be wondering, and at the time I thought as you're about to see, the Lamborghini brake tested me at the 100 board here. As I'm about to lift at the 100 board, I lift, the Lamborghini slams on the brakes, and I bump into the back of them. Now, at the time, I said to myself, that guy brake tested me. What actually happened there was that was the Lamborghini's natural line going into turn 10 to brake at the 100 board. And having looked at footage of other drivers in this race, a good number of drivers were braking at the 100 board, and what that meant was their overall speed going through turn 10 was weaker compared to my own, and that's how I was making up a lot of time on the Lamborghini. Unfortunately, because I didn't tuck in to the right hand side of turn 10, because I expected the Lamborghini to do the same racing line as me and the same braking point as me, that's why I went charging into the back of them. So again, that's entirely my fault. That it wasn't them brake testing, I just made a stupid error of expecting the guy in front to do exactly the same thing as what I would do. And that's something I need to work on. Getting used to that other drivers may have very different lines from what I do, or very different confidence levels in the circuit and their knowledge of it and their car's capabilities. So with that bump, what it means is I've got to do all the work again to get past the Lamborghini in front, because the gap is 1.7 seconds as we both get a clean run through the Porsche curves and now come into the forward chicanes. What you're going to see here is that I'm faster through these chicanes, cutting across them nicely. It means I can really close up to the back of the Lamborghini with 4th place now, an Audi R8, picking up a penalty by cutting while the chicanes, a 1 second penalty by looks of things, that's going to bring them ever closer to us. But at the time, what you can imagine is right now in my head, the frustration is building massively. I want to get past this guy and get up into 5th so I can get 4th potentially. So as we come through the Dunlop curve here into the Dunlop chicane, you'll see the Lamborghini gets very deep on the brakes, and I decide to go for it in turn 3 here. And by making this tiniest of cuts across the curb and leaving the track limits, I end up picking up a half-second penalty. I sort of, right, sorry, you picked up a penalty, just outdrive the Lamborghini before you get to the penalty zone, which is the second part of the Mulsanne straight. Just leave this guy behind, and that way the penalty doesn't matter. So I decide here, and you're going to see I really go for it as the Lamborghini starts to fall back. Coming through into turn 6 here, I take a natural break because I don't want to pick up a second penalty, but the Lamborghini does the exact same thing as myself this time, and so that gap has already widened to 1 second, 1.1 seconds. I'm pulling away from them, because whilst they've got a strong top speed, it looks as though their exit out of turn 6 was not as strong as what it could have been, and once they're going to start gaining, they're also fighting the chap who's just overtaken them for 6th place, and because the two are fighting quite a bit, although they're bump drafting one another now by the looks of things as they're starting to gain, it means I'm going to be safe going into 7, and if I can get a good run out of this first chicane going into the penalty zone, I'm not going to have to worry about the guys behind catching up to me going into turn 8. So can I get it right? Coming down to 2nd gear, getting on the throttle gradually, we'll get a clean run out of there, and we can see because the guys behind are fighting one another, the gap opens up to 1.8 seconds. I take my half-second penalty, and whilst the gap is going to start contracting now at an increasing rate, because they're so far behind, I don't have to worry. The Audi in front of me has taken their 1 second penalty, so I'm starting to gain on them at a dramatic rate as well, despite them having a rather powerful top speed down these straights at the very top end in 6th gear. But it means that I'm now starting to get closer and closer to 4th, and I can put the guys behind me to distant memory. I don't have to worry about them anymore as we come into turn 8 here, and I'm hunting. I want 4th place. I'm desperate to get 4th place now, because I know I can do it. So as we come down into the 3rd and final part of the Mulsanne straight, I'm thinking now, right, expect that the guy in front may do some alarmingly different racing lines to you if you get right on their backside. Expect the unexpected now based on the experience of the Lamborghini. We've got to keep that in mind. But until we get close to them, we're going to be losing some time on them for now, simply because they've got the better straight speed. There's a yellow flag here, so it looks as though perhaps somebody's had a bit of an accident coming out of turn 9. We'll have to wait and see. But regardless, we come out of turn 9, and what transpires is 3rd place got a little bit, sorry, 2nd place I should say, got a little bit wrong in turn 9. Looks like they went into the one and had to recover. And unfortunately for me, remember the situation earlier with the Aston Martin we were chasing for 2 laps? Well, it's a rinse and repeat, because the Audi now has the slipstream advantage off of 3rd place. I don't have the slipstream advantage, so those two are going to be pulling one another along going up into turn 10, and I've got to make up all the time as the Audi gets past 4th, the Brit in 4th now. As they get past them, going into turn 10, I've got to try and make up the time through just driving the car off its rims, going through the final sectors of the circuit. Can we do it? We'll have to wait and see. But it definitely looks as though the Brit and the Jaguar in 4th place is struggling somewhat with their car. As we come down to turn 12 here, miss the apex a tiny bit. The Jaguar does pick up a 3-second penalty by looks of things. That's a bit awkward. They're going to be taking that in the final penalty zone. So we are guaranteed to get 4th place now, so long as we don't do anything silly. But can we get 3rd off of the Audi, who's going to inherit 3rd in the final penalty zone of the track? Let's see what we can do. What of the Jaguar right now effectively holding the Audi up as they go through the Porsche curves for the final time. We get nicely tucked in here. 4th gear, straight on the throttle as we hit the curb there, coming up into turn 14 right now. Coming through in 5th gear, we're going to be lifting very slightly going into turns 15. And then we go through into 16 before coming through into 17. You see we're hooking up very nicely here and the time is closing. Can we get the place back as we go into 17? Car going a little sideways, but we don't mind that. We're in the slipstream zone of the Audi in front now as they're about to go past the Jaguar, who takes their penalty, pulling over to the left hand side. Right behind the Audi. Can we get them in the Ford chicanes? Not enough for Ford chicane number 1. Perhaps we can get them on the second one if they get a little bit sideways going into the final chicane. I'm flooring it as hard as I can, but go a bit deep here into the chicane. I'm right up the backside of the Audi, but it's just not enough to get third. So we're bringing it home in 4th place. I will admit, when this race ended, the first thing I did was immediately start kicking myself and feel extremely disappointed in the fact that I'd thrown away my qualifying lap, which cost me pole and potentially the race win. And on top of that, given my qualifying position at 9th, I'd thrown away the opportunity of perhaps picking up a podium through picking up a silly penalty, and on top of that, making mistakes in running behind other drivers multiple times. But upon reflection, I had more time to think about it. Going into this race, I actually felt I was going to struggle, simply because the Mulsanne straight afforded a key advantage to a good number of cars compared to the NSX with respect to straight line speed. And if anything, this was a bogey circuit for my car in that it didn't really play to the NSX's strengths. And to come home in 4th as a result is actually no mean feat and something I should be proud of. And really that conveys a sense across the entire first 3 races of the season. All tracks which are focused on high speed, albeit race number 2 was perhaps a little bit more favourable for the NSX, but definitely races 1 and 3 were bogey tracks for the car. And to pick up a good set of results in those 3 races means that when I'm put on tracks for the NSX where it's going to be more towards the NSX's liking, perhaps I can really start picking up the podiums and even 1 or 2 race wins. So I've got that to look forward to. And the key thing I need to improve upon is running behind other drivers, particularly those who may not be as confident in taking certain racing lines or similar racing lines to myself, and their braking points may be extremely different, as we found out with the Lamborghini. But there's plenty to improve upon, and if anything, the first 3 races have been a key success, so upwards and onwards to the next races in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you for watching them. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I've been TX141, and until next time, take care and drive safely.